Caged, bedridden, in court and on trial. Hosni Mubarak's fall from power is now in a new uncharted phase, but the anger of the Egyptian people is still there as they look for justice. Will the trial bring us that? Will it diffuse the rage? And will it mark a turning point in Egypt's history? Mubarak on trial. This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. On Wednesday, an 83-year-old man went on trial in Cairo, charged with corruption and premeditated murder. His full name is Mohammed Hosni Saeed Mubarak, and he used to be the president of Egypt. Those are the facts. The rest is a combination of revolution, public anger, attempted political change, and the future of a country after 30 years of one man's rule. The trial itself was dramatic in so many ways. Mubarak flown in from Sharm el-Sheikh and then wheeled into a cage in the courtroom in Cairo on a hospital bed to stand trial alongside his sons, themselves detained since April and charged with corruption. They all pled not guilty, but will now have to answer so many questions about what exactly happened in January of 2011, why nearly 850 people were killed and more than 6,000 wounded in the uprising which toppled the leadership. And it's not just the Mubarak men on trial. There's the former Interior Minister Habib al-Adly along with 6 of his senior officers. Al-Adly's already serving a 12-year sentence for money laundering and profiteering. He's now being tried for ordering troops to fire at protesters as well. Inevitably, the focus will be on Hosni Mubarak himself. He is formally accused of conspiring to kill protesters during what would become known as Egypt's revolution, and inciting police officers to fire live ammunition and attack them with moving vehicles. There is also the corruption charges that, as president, he held onto 4 villas and other real estate in Sharm el-Sheikh worth over $5 million, that he gave close business associate Hussein Salem millions of square meters of state-owned land, and that he conspired with the former oil minister to give Salem some $2 billion in profit in a gas deal. The question is, what will it all amount to? Will it be enough for a population still angry, and not just at the reaction to the uprising, but the 30 years which preceded it? And will a conviction close the Mubarak chapter and allow Egypt to move on? All things to discuss with our panel for today, who I'd like to introduce now. In Cairo, Abdallah Al-Ashal, a professor of international law at the American University in Cairo, also a former assistant in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In Newcastle in the UK is Daniel Newman, a professor of Arabic Studies at Durham University. Mr. Newman also a special advisor at the Centre for Criminal Law and Criminal Justice. And rounding out our panel back in Cairo is Ahmed Naguib, the co-founder of the Council of Trustees of the Revolution in Egypt. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us for this Inside Story. Let's just talk a bit about day one of this trial, the cage, the hospital bed, all the shouting in court. Just some brief thoughts from all of you. Abdallah Al-Ashal, if I can start first with you in Cairo for your reaction.
First of all, I think that getting Mubarak to trial in Cairo, this is a big victory for the revolution, and this was the first demand for the revolution since the 11th of February. And secondly, the people had been pacified by seeing Mubarak in the cage and seeing also some people around him, especially his 2 sons and some of his symbolic figures. But I think at the same time that while this is a great precedent in the history of Egypt and the region as well, it would be a good lesson for the future. I think that many things have to be said about the course of the trial, and also how the approach had been adopted by the court, and why in particular this place had been chosen in which Mubarak had given his last speech when he was in power, and he was in fact making very lightly of the opposition, who were in fact alienated totally from his regime. So first of all, I would like to emphasize that the trial itself is very good as a first incident in the Egyptian history since the pharaohs, who were taking their rulers as gods. And secondly, I think that this should be handled very carefully, because having Mubarak in Cairo itself, this is not a full blessing. We have some repercussions, because we still have the regime itself embodied in the body of the state and in the air. There is no purification or cleaning up of the elements of the regime, and this is a demand which had been put very vehemently by the revolution to the Prime Minister. But I think that while Mubarak is here and he is there very near to the site of the trial, the approach itself of the trial started with some other peoples. I think that Mubarak should be singled out as the head of the state, and he should be put to political trials, because Mubarak himself is accused of many things, very serious. Any single accusation may lead him to death.
Okay,
One of
let
them
me
is
interrupt just a
treason.
moment, Mr. Abdullah, if you don't mind, because I'd like to bring in our other guests and get some thoughts from them before we get too much. There's Daniel Newman in Newcastle. I mean, it was a spectacle in the end, wasn't it? It never really stood a chance of being a quote-unquote normal trial.
Well, you know, my word, it's been a dramatic day, and I think if you had said to anybody a year ago that the man who had absolute power, Hosni Mubarak, who had the power over life and death, that he would be in a cage on a stretcher with his two sons in prison clothing, I don't think that person could have imagined it. Now, it has immense symbolic value. Whether or not this says something about the revolution and how things will unfold is, I'm afraid, quite a different story. One shouldn't forget that the fact that the trial was held was surrounded by a great deal of controversy. And it is safe to say that the military council was pressured into holding the trial when it did. And in more ways than one, it serves as a diversion for the movement, the protest movement that is going on in Egypt as we speak. People are very unhappy with the way things have been going after the revolution, and indeed one may well wonder whether we can still talk about a revolution when only its head has been removed, but the security apparatus is intact. So I think but it is, of course, of immense symbolic and historic value that Hosni Mubarak is being put on trial.
Ahmed Naguib, I can see you nodding in agreeing with what Daniel Newman's saying, that this idea that they were pressured into holding the trial, it's a diversion. I would have thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there would be perhaps some, I don't know if appreciation is the right word, but the fact that 6 months after the country was absolutely turned on its head, this is happening. They haven't, in some way, they haven't dragged their heels on it. They've made it happen.
I have to agree with Daniel. However, what we saw today was a serious act of pursuing a true and legal procedures of a court of Mubarak and his regime. However, we revolutionists, we understand that the regime has not fallen yet. You have a lot of Mubarak cronies out there. The scapegoats that they've gotten into the prison are not good enough. We understand that these are just scapegoats. However, we have to say this is a historical moment, and that we're very pleased that the military council has yet fulfilled one of the demands of the revolution. The court has not ended yet. The victory should not be proclaimed yet. Yes, Mubarak and his likes will fear this moment forever. However, when the court ruling is out, this is when we should be jubilant, and then we can claim victory. But right now, this is far from being victory. There were many shortcomings in what happened today. The fact that there were riots outside and the police could not control the Mubarak supporters from aggravating the families of the martyrs. This is also a serious thing to take into consideration. Finally, I have to say that I have to agree with Daniel, because this is overshadowing many important things, and a lot of people will invest in this moment in taking the focus of the public from what needs to be done. I have to say, even the Syrian government did not refrain from using it in its own favor by attacking its own people, using the shift of attention from the media from Syria to Egypt. So this is by all means a very big event. However, it should not take people's attention away from the real prize, which is Egypt becoming a fully fledged democracy.
Gentlemen, let's just pause for a moment. I want to take our viewers and you as well, just on a little refresher course, and look at how we got to this day. Starting back on February the 11th, when Mubarak finally bowed to those public demands and stepped down as president, quickly fled to the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. 2 months later, though, he was admitted to hospital there in Sharm after being questioned by prosecutors. The very next day, April 13, Mubarak was detained. He stayed in hospital. His 2 sons were arrested. They were taken to the torture prison in Cairo. Since then, and we've alluded to this already, Mubarak's representatives talking about his health. They said he had a heart attack, that he was in a coma, that he wasn't fit to stand trial. But nearly 6 months after his abdication, Hosni Mubarak is now in court, apparently confined to his hospital bed, as we've seen, but he is there nonetheless. So let's go back to Abdullah Al-Ashal in Cairo for his thoughts on this. The health issue. Yes, he was lying in his bed and it was quite a bit of theatre in a way, but he looked pretty lucid. He knew what was going on. What do you think is really of all these health issues which have been made?
Yeah, I think that putting Mubarak to trial was a big demand first, but we didn't expect that this is going to happen. This is why they were spending a lot of time to go around, and people were having many suspects and many doubts about bringing Mubarak to Cairo. So till last night, I myself didn't believe that it would be tomorrow, this morning, in Cairo. This is why I think it's a very big surprise, and this is a part of it. But I think they had halfway. We had to bring Mubarak to Cairo, and at the same time the course of the trials would be adopted by their own vision. So this is why you have half-hearted trial, and I think being a jurist, I think that the course itself would lead to what the population in Egypt or the revolution had been asking for. We have to start, as I said before, with the political crimes. But to start with the political crimes, you should have very solid grounds for incrimination of the acts of Mubarak.
But
and
they
this
have
is
to
not
go
in
with.
fact paved.
Sorry to interrupt. They have to go with what's on the table, and I guess the quote-unquote easier thing to go for was the events of January and the corruption as well, solid things which can be convicted on. The thing is, in the end, it's going to need something really concrete to get a conviction, isn't it? It's going to need a memo or a transcript or something where Mubarak said to his deputies, use force, use live ammunition, stop the protests.
Of course, Mubarak, he has rejected all the accusations, and this is strategy of standing for this trial. And I don't know whether the court is going to collect something else. Especially, we have very crooked lawyers who are in his favor, and they are defending him very strongly. So I feel that the defense of the people who are the victims of his acts are very weak, and the court itself is in fact very lost among both of them. So while postponing the trials to the 15th of August, I don't know during this time what they are going to do. They are going to gain time only because since April they had been notified with the trial, and all the documents had been delivered to the lawyers of Mubarak.
Daniel Newman, let's get your thoughts on the chances of conviction. I know it's very, very early, but again, the point I was making there is that it's going to need something absolutely incontrovertible to get a conviction here.
Well, indeed, and I think everybody's hoping for that to happen. But if I may return to your initial question about Mubarak's health, because there's quite a few questions that hover over whether or not his health is as bad as his physician would like us to believe. And indeed, without wishing to make light of this, it is quite striking that when he was in power, he was said to be in perfect health, and the minute he was ousted, he teetered into a coma. And indeed, it is important to state that he appeared very lucid, and at times one couldn't help but wonder whether he really needed the stretcher. As for the broader point of the conviction, that indeed it is very early days, and there are a number of things that have to be taken into consideration which support a view that that I hold, at least, that it is more of symbolic than of actual value. Firstly, the number of defendants is quite significant, and indeed one wonders how they were chosen. Because the officers that are there, the charges that are laid before them can easily be levelled at many of their colleagues. Secondly, the linking of the charge. In fact, this was one of the points made by the defence lawyer. The linking of Mubarak and Adli and the officers and his sons. Secondly. Thirdly, the nature of the accusations themselves. On the one hand, we have the killing of the people at Tahrir Square, the demonstrators. Then we have embezzlement of public funds. Then we have the export of gas to Israel. So there's quite a few things that are put into the mix. And for a start, I think we have to prepare ourselves for a very lengthy trial. And it will take quite a lot of legal handiwork in order to disentangle this Gordian knot. So I think that will there be a conviction at the end? Well, I'm not sure. And secondly, even if there is a conviction, I think that we're not out of the woods yet, because the conviction will inevitably give rise to protest by those who wanted to be more severe and those who wanted to be less severe. So I think it really, but it is in any case a test case for the military council and indeed for Egypt, and to show that the revolution has yielded something, because I cannot stress enough the importance of having this trial at a time when really the revolution has yielded very little fruit. The economic and social conditions are extremely poor. The military council still has not given a date for the elections, still hasn't given a date for the constitutional amendments. So if we really have to look at this trial in the broader scheme of things. And will there be a conviction? Some of them will definitely be convicted. Whether or not Mubarak himself will be convicted, I mean, the jury, pardon the pun, the jury is very much out on that.
Ahmed Naguib, briefly, if you wouldn't mind, because the clock is starting to run down and I want to move on to some other topics. I'm going to say that your view would be that premeditated murder charges and corruption charges aren't enough. The word I hear and see bandied about a lot is treason, trying to put him on trial for treason or something like that.
Absolutely, you got it out of my mouth. I was just about to say Mubarak needs to be tried for treason, he and Adli, because he took an oath both as a military officer and as a president and his minister to protect the people of this country and its assets and everything that he should have worked for, he has worked against. He has been a close ally to Israel, more than he should have. It was at the expense of the national interest of Egypt, and he had for so long worked against the national interest. But what he had done since the 25th of Jan, the killings, I would like to say that you do not need proof of him giving the right order, because even if Adli was working on his own, Mubarak witnessed this happen for days and days, which means that his silence is an act of approval, a confirmation of his agreement to what was happening. So there's no more proof than that. For me, it's a done case. It's sealed, because he has silenced, he was silent for such a long time. Okay. It's a proof of his condemnation. The other thing is his appearance was quite a fiasco. It's a farce, because I think he looked healthy enough to be at least in a wheelchair. The trial should not have been allowed to take place if he's in a bed. This is an attempt to gain sympathy, which it's not well invested, I guess, because people cannot sympathize with someone who killed their kids.
I want to pause and actually just show our viewers some pictures, images which are imprinted in our brains now, but another look at a comparison, in fact, of Cairo on different days. First of all, January 28th, 3 days after the revolution effectively began, the most extraordinary pictures of violence between Egyptian police and protesters. As the situation got worse, the military became involved, and by the end of that day, I remember it very clearly, I was on air that day, you knew the playing field had changed and the Egyptian people weren't going to back down. Now look at this. August 3, day one of the trial, and still the violence goes on. Outside the police academy where the trial is being held, we see police there, and as the tape moves on, you'll see as the riot police again in their full gear again. There we go, battling the Egyptian people, both pro and anti-Mubarak. So even with the man himself out of office for 6 months and a constitutional referendum held in that time, the levels of anger are still extremely high. So Ahmed Agib, let me come back to you as a member of the trustees of the revolution in Egypt. I mean, you talked earlier about pro-Mubarak supporters today being violent. Clearly there were people on both sides being violent and the police were involved. In a way, it's almost disappointing. You watch this happen, you're almost feeling, don't ruin this, Egypt. This is a big moment for everyone. Don't let violence get in the way again.
Absolutely. But, you know, paid thugs are paid thugs. The pro-Mubarak supporters are part of the former National Democratic Party, which had a military wing of thugs. Those are intentionally inciting those images so that things won't go well, and they simply want to reinforce the fact that Mubarak has supporters, which is not really true. The only supporters are not real supporters, but those who are saying they've been economically disadvantaged after the happenings of the 25th of Jan. So they say things were not as bad as they are right now because they feel the pain. But when there's a democratically elected government, things will look different. So those images are incited by Mubarak's cronies and their thugs, paid thugs.
Abdullah Al-Ashal, I'll come back to you just briefly because we're starting to run out of time, as I say. Seeing those pictures today, what did you feel about the protests outside the court?
Yes, I would concur with Mr. Ahmed that Mubarak himself could be tried in a way that he could be fleeing the conviction. And I feel that his lawyers are preparing for that. And if this happens, this would be a very catastrophic act in Egypt, because this may lead to a civil war between the supporters of Mubarak and those who had been adhering to the revolution. So I'm afraid that the whole process is divided, as I said, into two halves. One is to get Mubarak, and the second is to free Mubarak. So I feel that starting with these crimes, which are not very strong, they are dealing with him as a normal person, not at the head of the state. And what Mr. Ahmed said now concerning the evidence that Mubarak had been assented to what Al-Adli did is correct. But at the same time, in this case, you need to give proofs and evidences that something concrete had been emanating from Mubarak to Al-Adli. But if you take the court back to the political background, I think Mubarak would be responsible politically for everything which had been happening, not only during the revolution, but during the 30 years when he killed many people and tortured many people, and many had been committing suicide because of the acts of Mubarak and the economic situation which had been, in fact, suffocating the population in Egypt.
Final word to Daniel Newman, who is a professor of Arabic studies, but I'm going to ask you to put your psychologist hat on here, if you wouldn't mind. Is this an important psychological barrier for Egypt to get past? There is reform to move on with. It's slow so far. Can that happen as long as Mubarak looms large over everything?
Well, I think that to answer that question, firstly, I think it is psychologically very important to see Mubarak and his sons in court, in that cage, which one can't imagine the impression that will have on ordinary Egyptians who have at least two generations of whom have lived under his rule. However, I don't agree with your second statement that Mubarak still looms large. In reply to one of the comments made by one of your other guests, yes, of course, there is a thuggish or Baltagiya element that is still very active. But one should not forget that when a regime has been in power for several decades, it relies on a substantial part of the population being party to its activities. So there is a hard core of Mubarak elements. Whether this is a large group, I doubt that sincerely. But to say that at the moment Mubarak himself looms large, no. Of course, Mubarak's regime looms as large as ever.
Right.
Let us not forget that Marshal Tantawi was, of course, Mubarak's right-hand man, and he is still very much in the driver's seat.
Gentlemen, it's been fascinating talking to you. August 15, it all resumes again. Maybe we'll chat again then. Abdullah Al-Ashal, Daniel Newman and Ahmed Daghi with us today on Inside Story. Thank you, gentlemen. And to you, our viewer, thank you for joining us for Inside Story. Comments and suggestions, do send them in to us. InsideStory@aljazeera.net is our email address. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. It's goodbye for now.